Suffering is a part of life. That is certainly true. But suffering doesn't have to be consistent and unbearable. Sure, sometimes it will be those things. But generally speaking, your suffering should be bearable. It shouldn't completely crush you. If you find yourself being completely crushed by suffering without necessarily blaming the victim, it's probably your fault. Now, before you click out of this video, hear me out first to see where I'm coming from. I'm not in any way saying that you are the sole reason for all of the suffering that is occurring in your life. Of course, that would be really silly of me to say. However, I think that if we're all honest with ourselves, we can look back in our lives to times where we think, man, I really was just being a knucklehead and didn't want to listen. Reflecting on those times and remembering them is proof that we're all guilty of extending our suffering unnecessarily. This doesn't mean that you're a bad person, but it does mean that part of the suffering is your fault. Knowing this fact is extremely liberating. It means you get to take responsibility for it and fix it instead of just constantly blaming external circumstances for why your life is the way that it is. It is the furthest thing from being empowered when one is sitting down in the dumps and just whining and complaining about how much they've been wrong. Independent of what others think of you, most likely negatively, you would feel completely paralyzed and that you're not worth anything. Do you really want to be in this situation, especially over a long period of time and with increasing intensity? I hope not. You want to be able to accept the fact that suffering is a part of life. You cannot escape it no matter what you do, but you can't stop there. The other side of the story is that there's always light at the end of the tunnel of your personal suffering. This comes in the form of self-development and personal growth. You cannot get this by just reading a book or meditating on other people's suffering through their own stories. You must endure it yourself in order to fully develop your character. This doesn't mean you need to experience as much suffering as possible in order for you to develop character. Not all suffering is necessary, and in fact, you should develop enough wisdom to reduce the amount and intensity of your suffering as you mature. You must be able to develop your character and wisdom after every event of suffering. You simply cannot let suffering be in vain. There are always nuggets of wisdom you can glean from your experiences of suffering in life. And those things will equip you not only to help yourself in the future, but others as well. When we cease to learn from our mistakes, we extend our suffering. When we have a victim mindset and think we can do no wrong and that our suffering is always the result of external circumstances that are outside of our control, we extend our suffering. When we choose to complain and whine and join other miserable people instead of working on solutions, we extend our suffering. This is what our society has been teaching us to be, and that is the exact teaching that we must abjectly reject. Rejecting a victimhood mentality is crucial in alleviating our suffering. This should start in the K-12 education system all the way up to college and university. We cannot allow these institutions to teach children and young adults that they are destined for misery and hopelessness because of things like climate change, systematic racism, economic inequality, gender inequality, and all the other buzzwords they like to use. So far, these ideologies have created an enormous amount of suffering in younger generations, which is evident by the fact that the rates of depression and anxiety among them is much higher than among older generations. We must inculcate them with positive thoughts about themselves and reality. This doesn't mean that we need to inflate their egos and make them narcissistic jerks. Instead, what we need to do is to encourage them to weigh the negativity which they receive from our institutions with the positive realities of our society. Having this balance is going to make them more resilient when it comes to suffering. And this resilience will help them to be more productive instead of lazy and complacent when future challenges arrive. As I said, suffering is a part of life, so it will never end. But it doesn't mean that we have to add our own suffering when we don't actually have to. So that's it for this video. If you like this content, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, comment, and share to get notified about more videos like this one. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.